This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is March 23rd, 2025. I am coming off a new episode of the Kabbalah drama with Richard Willett. We just recorded another one. And he brought up and informed me that Donald Trump is willing to accept an offer from King Charles III for America to become part of the British Commonwealth. And Richard Willett mentioned that Alex Jones was ranting about this and asked me for my thoughts about it. And it immediately sparked a memory of something I had written in my book, The Manufacture and Sale of St. Einstein, 20 years ago, where I talked about the fact that Congressman Jacob Thorkelson of Montana entered a letter into the congressional record, which was purportedly written by the infamous Colonel Edward Mandell House, who was a Rothschild agent in America, who wanted America to go to war with Mexico so that America could annex Mexico, who was very close to the British. And this letter was addressed to Lloyd George, and it was supposedly written, I think, June 10th, 1919. And I pointed this out to Richard, that this plan was set forth in this letter purportedly from House to Lloyd George. It's been attributed to other people, Wiseman and Lord Northcliffe, because it wasn't actually signed. Now, when Thorkelson entered this into the congressional record, it was reproduced in the unbound edition of the congressional record, but it was completely scrubbed from the bound editions of the congressional record and the appendix of it. But George Armstrong, in his book, The Zionist, reproduces a good chunk of it. He got it from the unbound congressional record, and we'll have a look at that in just a minute. But I've been saying for quite some time now, and these are my original insights. Other people try to copy them, but I'm the source. Donald Trump is Messiah, son of Joseph. Jesus Christ returned to be put on trial by King Herod, who is being played by King Charles III. Keir Starmer played the role of Pontius Pilate, finding no fault with Trump and directing him to King Herod, the Edomite king of the Jews, to be put on trial by Charles III, and to have America enter what Webster Tarpley called the Anglo-American Empire. Tarpley was once a Larouchian. Lyndon LaRouche talked about the Anglo-Dutch Empire. And Webb Tarpley, for decades, I think it was harping on this idea that there is an Anglo-American empire. LaRouche was accused of using the idea as cover for his belief that the Jewish Rothschilds were running the world out of the city of London. So there's a lot of history behind all this, and we should dig into it because it's very interesting. This fits in exactly, again, with my original insights into the idea that America and the United Kingdom are the Atlanticist seafaring power that represents the Leviathan as identified by Alexander Dugin in those express terms. The Leviathan represents Christendom. It represents the Roman, Edomite, Amalekite Empire. The souls of the Romans are supposedly reincarnated into the European peoples. Rome had a big outpost in Great Britain. And they view European Americans and the British people, the indigenous British people, as the reincarnation of the Romans. The Romans in Christendom are identified with the Edomite Amalekites, who must be completely exterminated. So as I've been saying, they've been setting up conflict between the Leviathan and the behemoth of the Eurasianists. The Leviathan is clearly identified as the Atlanticist of the United Kingdom and America. And this Congressman, Thorkelson, he pointed out that Andrew Carnegie had called for America to annex Canada and for America to reunite with England and once again become part of the British Empire. And Thorkelson, from 1939 through 1940, introduced all kinds of documentation and evidence into the congressional record, and he claimed that Jews were trying to take over the world. They were trying to reunite the British Empire, have America annex Canada, and then become part of the English Commonwealth. And Thorkelson, well, we'll have a look at what Thorkelson had to say. Again, want to thank Richard Willett for bringing my attention to the fact that Donald Trump, as Alex Jones was ranting about, might well have America rejoin the British Empire. And I'm going to give the full Kabbalistic reasons why this may take place and what it signifies in terms of this building up this Leviathan. Now, as I explained in Kabbalah drama, Donald Trump plays the role of the rebel Jewish king who rebels against the Roman West and becomes the leader of the Roman West in order to subvert it from within. Jesus Christ did that. Jesus Christ was the rebel Jewish king who was accused of attempting to subvert the Roman Empire and reestablish Israel as a kingdom to rule the world, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is Messiah, son of Joseph, Jesus Christ, reincarnated as the Antichrist. He has become the head of the Leviathan, Atlanticist power of America and Great Britain. He wants to annex Canada and unite this whole Leviathan so that he can subvert it from within and destroy and exterminate the Roman, Edomite, Amalekite West of white Europeans. And he has driven a wedge into the Western Alliance and is trying to break America away from NATO and ultimately to use America as a force to join in an alliance with Russia to exterminate European whites. And then it will all turn against America itself. And he will have, if all goes according to plan, he will have annexed Canada, and Australia will also be brought into this. And then all the white people in America and Australia will be exterminated. And part of this is the annexation of Greenland and the Arctic territories of Canada to use as an American Siberia to establish gulags and penal colonies, as I anticipated he would do. Long before he did it, he has set up penal colony in El Salvador. And once he gains control of Greenland and the Arctic regions of Canada, I strongly suspect he's going to start trying to ship continental Europeans, British, and Americans, white people, to those gulags he's going to establish up there. And I've explained all that. I don't need to go over that again. So let's look at what's going on. This big brouhaha, which involves Trump and King Charles III, Nigel Farage, another one of these controlled opposition agents who's in the Trump crowd and was courted by Musk just as Trump was. He's signed off on this. He approves of it, and we'll look at that too. So the Independent Reports Trump weighs in on report King Charles will offer U.S. membership to British Commonwealth. Sounds good, said Trump. UK lawmaker, that being Nigel Farage, reacts to Trump suggesting U.S. could join British Commonwealth. Right-wing British member of Parliament Nigel Farage responded favorably to the idea of the United States joining the British Commonwealth after President Trump suggested it could happen on Friday. So, as I said, Thorkelson wanted to enter this into the congressional record, did enter it into the congressional record, but it was scrubbed from the printed volumes of that. But what was not scrubbed is the mention of that fact. Responding to Mr. Thorkelson, Mr. Thompson said, I observe from the Daily Record that on Wednesday, October 11th, beginning at page 598, there appears 6 small type pages of an extension of remarks by the gentleman from Montana, purporting to be a letter signed by Colonel Edward Mandell House and addressed to the Right Honorable David Lloyd George from the British Consulate in New York City on June 10th, 1919, in which Colonel House, in effect, proposed, as the gentleman from Montana suggests, an invisible government for world domination. May I ask the gentleman if this is the late Colonel Edward Mandell House of Texas, and one time an intimate of President Wilson? Thorkelson responded, that is who it is supposed to be. Yes. Now this from page 598 forward was scrubbed from the printed editions. But the congressional record from October 11th, 1939, this was October 13th, 1939, referencing October 11th, 1939. Mr. Thorkelson, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to extend my own remarks in the record and to include herein a letter from Colonel Edward Mandell House to Honorable David Lloyd George. Without objection, it is so ordered. There was no objection. The letter was entered in the record and it was scrubbed. And thanks to Armstrong, we still have a record of some of it. He said that in a later booklet, he republished the full letter, and perhaps I'll try to dig that out sometime. I'll show you what I had written about all this. Well, let me show you that now. In my book, I probably was writing about this in 2003, and the book was published in 2006. Another surreal part of the story of the very odd Colonel House, it was Colonel House who got Woodrow Wilson in so he could start the Federal Reserve, the income tax, and bring America into World War I. Occurred posthumously in October of 1939. He was always standing behind Wilson, and he was the Rothschild agent who controlled Wilson. England and France had just declared war on Germany on 3 September 1939. Many Americans worried that history would repeat itself. Congressman Jacob Thorkelson of Montana submitted a letter into the congressional record, which was allegedly written by Colonel House and was addressed to David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of England. The letter was dated 10 June 1919 and was allegedly written on stationery from the British Embassy in New York. Though Thorkelson did not have the supposed original, therefore there was no original signature which could be checked for authenticity. The letter made it appear that Great Britain sought to recapture America as a colony through the League of Nations. If the letter were authentic, one would have to believe that Colonel House, and J.P. Morgan and Company were corrupting agents of the British government and were undermining American sovereignty. And there is evidence that they were, especially if one considers the fact that Rothschilds essentially ruled England, Morgan, and House. While this may sound preposterous, there were published calls for the melding of Great Britain and the United States, such as those of Clarence K. Strite. There's a lot on that, and I have the notations in my book, as I'll show you very shortly. I'm not going to cover Strite in this presentation, but maybe in another one I will. Who was an aide with the American mission at the Versailles Peace Conference in the First World War, and later a New York Times reporter who covered the League of Nations. In 1938, Strite openly called for the two nations to unite and more broadly for a world government. House's secretary, Francis B. Denton, immediately stated that the alleged House letter was spurious, but what Trump's doing vindicates all this. The New York Times published several articles denouncing the letter as a fake. Fabulously wealthy banker and oil man George Washington Armstrong tried to explain the discrepancies between the House report and contradictory facts in 1950 to 1951 by claiming that Great Britain was controlled by the Zionists and the N.M. Rothschild and Son Bank, which controlled the Bank of England, the railroads, and the press. Armstrong attributed the letter to Lord Northcliffe. So let's have a look at my notes. This will be interesting to, especially to anyone doing research on this. And again, I published all this back in 2006. I cited Eustace Mullins in this context, C.K. Strite. Here are all the references for Strite that I may go over sometime if this really pans out and they really do try to bring America into the British Commonwealth. Here were the responses to Thorkelson when he entered that letter, trying to discredit it, just as they tried to discredit the protocols. Here are the citations from George W. Armstrong. He wrote a lot about the Zionists and the corruption. Here are the precise citations, and I'm going to show you his book. And then Cecil Rhodes was involved in all this, and the American Monthly Review of Reviews. A lot of this was quoted by Thorkelson in the Congressional Record. A lot of that still remains in the Congressional Record, even though the letter itself was scrubbed. So let's try to correct that. And let me show you let me see. Ooh, I got to walk and chew gum at the same time here. There we go. So this is one of the things entered in the Congressional Record on August 19th, 1940. This was part of a 12-part series that he entered into the Congressional Record. Mr. Speaker, in order that the American people may have a clearer understanding of those who over a period of years have been undermining this republic in order to return it to the British Empire, I have inserted in the record a number of articles to prove this point. These articles are entitled Steps Towards British Union, and this letter was called the British secret document in the Congressional Record. It's also referred to as the House Report. Steps toward British Union, a world state, and international strife, which is what his series was titled. This is part one, and in this I include a hope expressed by Mr. Andrew Carnegie In his book entitled Triumphant Democracy, Carnegie was calling for the United States and Canada to reunite and to form a British Union in 1904. That's how old this plan is. Let men say that when they will, I say that as surely as the sun in the heavens once shone upon Britain and America united, so surely is it one morning to rise, to shine upon, to greet again the reunited states, the British American Union. Thorkelson was thrashed in the media, especially the New York Times. He was attacked viciously, accused of anti-Semitism, and now we see that what he was saying was true. And there is indeed a plan, an openly expressed proposal to unite America and England and to unite America and Canada. And I've done a whole series of videos on how this is an old Freemasonic plan and how it was Freemasons who set up the exploration of the Arctic and of northern Canada and of Greenland. And it was the Freemasons who set up Andrew Johnson and Harry Truman. And Harry Truman was a major Freemason himself, to annex Canada and to annex Greenland. And they did annex Alaska, which was also part of this plan. You can go back in my videos. I give the full history of all that and how heavily the Freemasons were involved in all that. And this is proof of how the bankers, especially the Rothschilds and their agent, Colonel Edward Mandell House, was involved in all that. This statement is clear, and the organizations which Mr. Carnegie endowed have spent millions in order to bring this about. He quotes all kinds of stuff from Carnegie and others talking about these plans. These organizations were organized to bring about a British Union, a union in which the United States would again become a part of the British Empire. However, this has been upset to some extent by the attempt of the internationalists to establish their own government as an international world union, and there is therefore a conflict between the two, for England wants a British Union with America as a colony, and the international money changers want a Jewish-controlled union in order to establish their own world government. And he provided all kinds of evidence of that as well. Here's another part, proof of the authenticity of the British secret document. All throughout 1939 and 1940, he was talking about this letter and all the other proof. I shall now proceed to discuss the British secret document, which was addressed to the Right Honorable Lloyd George and dated June 10th, 1919. This has been discussed in the articles entitled Steps Towards a British Union World State and the International Internal Strife. I shall now proceed with further discussion of this despicable letter, and he goes on to describe it. This was a whole long series. I think I have the PDF. We'll get to that in a minute. All this, for people who are researching this, is described in part in Intrepid's Last, Then, and Now Secrets, History, Spies and Lies by Bill McDonald. He talks about the fact that Wiseman and House, Wiseman was always said to be House's elbow, and he tries to attribute the letter to Wiseman. Later were linked in the authorship of the controversial letter outlining British success in influencing the United States government and populace, purported to be a letter from the British consulate in New York City, dated June 10th, 1919, to then British Prime Minister David Lloyd George. It was labeled The Reconquest of America, or the Scheer document, named after an American who again brought it to light in the late 1920s. In 1939, Representative Dr. Jacob Thorkelson reintroduced a version of it into the U.S. Congress as the Colonel House Report, and it was published in the Congressional Record and was scrubbed from the Congressional Record. And then he goes on to give some more of this history, Special Advisor on Anglo-American Affairs. And so we have the proof that it was entered into the record. Armstrong gave some of this history in 1950 in his book, The Zionists, the British Secret Service Report, number 1919, called the Colonel E.M. House Letter, contains an official and authentic report of the First World War, this agency that brought it about, etc., etc. Discussion here will be limited to Imperial Unity, J.P. Morgan and Company, British Duplicity, and the League of Nations. This report or letter was presented to the House of Representatives by Congressman Thorkelson of Montana and is published in the Congressional Record of October 11th, 1939, page 598 to 604, as was mentioned here. Page 598, 6 small type pages of an extension of remarks by the gentleman from Montana, purporting to be a letter signed by Colonel E.M. House and addressed to the Right Honorable David Lloyd George. The letter or report is not published in the bound volumes of the Congressional Record of October 11th, 1939, or the appendix of that date. Evidently, some interested person prevented its publication despite the refusal of the House of Representatives to strike it from the record. The text is here set forth, can be easily verified by reference to an original unbound copy of the Congressional Record of October 11th, 1939. It will be published in full in the next edition of this booklet. It was called the Colonel E.M. House Letter, but it is not a letter. It is an official report made by an important officer of the British Secret Service on stationery of the British consulate. It reveals its official character and its verity upon its face. He contends it wasn't written by House, but was instead written by Lord Northcliffe. There's a lot of history about Lord Northcliffe, and it's given in Controversy of Zion by Douglas Reed, who was at the time the head of British propaganda department in enemy countries. The immensely wealthy private bank of N.M. Rothschild and Son and the Zionists controlled the British Empire then as well as now. They controlled the Bank of England, the press, the railroads, and the industries with minor exceptions. Lord Northcliffe was the publisher of the Daily Mail and the London Times. The report follows: Imperial Unity, British Consulate, New York City, June 10th, 1919. The Right Honorable David Lloyd George. From the moment of my arrival here, it was evident to me that such an I was highly honored by your personal letter of May 24th last, and wish to thank you for the cordial expression of approval of my work which it contained. You were very good enough to require from me a frank and confidential account of the campaign conducted under my direction in this country, together, etc., etc. Before you were called to direct the destinies of England, I shall review it. From the moment of my arrival here, it was evident to me that such an Anglo-American alliance as would ultimately result in the peaceful return of the American colonies to the dominion of the Crown could be brought about only with the consent of the dominant group of the controlling class, i.e. the deep state, which is being fronted by Donald Trump. For those who can afford the universities, we are, as I have already mentioned, plentifully supplying British-born or trained professors, lecturers, and presidents. A Canadian-born admiral now heads the United States Naval College. We are arranging for a greater interchange of professors between the two countries. The student interchange could be much improved. Rhodes scholarships are inadequate in number. I would suggest that the Carnegie trustees be approached to extend American students, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes through and outlines how the British and Americans can unite together with Canada seeking to return to the motherland. And so all this, not the full letter, but at least partially, is recorded in this first edition of The Zionist by George Washington Armstrong. And I didn't have time to look into the later editions of this book to see if he was able to actually do what he anticipated doing of reproducing the full 6 pages that were printed in the unbound edition of the Congressional Record. Here's another interesting book that addresses this topic for anyone doing research on it. I also recommend this. Through 1939, Thorkelson's remarks earned him regular, unflattering publicity in the national press. Yeah, he was viciously attacked for stating what we now know to be a fact through the actions of Donald Trump. On October 13th, it was actually October 11th, placed in the Congressional Record, a letter purportedly written by Colonel Edward House in 1919, 20 years earlier, proposed a plan for the peaceful reunification of the American colonies with Great Britain. Thorkelson presented the House letter as proof that the two nations had long been plotting a liaison that would compromise U.S. sovereignty. Thorkelson was bringing all this up because he exposed the fact that FDR was going to try to have a false flag attack that would bring us into the war on the side of England, just as the Lusitania had brought America into the war on the side of the British in World War I. And he tied it all to the Zionists and gave the full history of how that was all a farce and a fake pretext, and that he was concerned that a similar thing was about to happen, which it did with Pearl Harbor. So he was trying to expose all this to keep America out of the war. And Wilson and FDR had gotten elected on the idea that they would keep America out of wars. So anyone who is interested can look into this. Congressional staff members soon discovered that the Colonel House letter was a fake, written as a joke by an Irish American. We don't know that it was such a fake or such a joke. Before the letter had been withdrawn, however, President John demanded the House permanently revoke Thorkelson's privilege to insert material into the Congressional Record. Just as today, they were constantly trying to censor any exposure of the facts. The things that Thorkelson reproduced were exact quotations from authoritative primary sources, exactly as was done in the Dearborn Independent and Henry Ford's collection of those articles from the Dearborn Independent in the series of books he had published reproducing those articles. The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. They would all quote primary sources that were absolutely 100% authentic and accurately reproduced. And there were always calls for censoring that as well as the protocols. The House letter incident provoked almost universal censure of Thorkelson. Again, he was attacked and he was censored. Time magazine claimed that the doctor's already low popularity in Congress hit rock bottom with the letter's publication. They were really trying to suppress this and refute it. So this book is, let's see here, Speaking Ill of the Dead, Jerks in Montana History. I think this is a part of a series, and it was originally published in 2000. Yeah, 2000, Falcon Publishing Incorporated. If you're looking for this, there are going to be other books related to other states. The one you want is Jerks in Montana History. Edited by Dave Walter, contributing authors John Axline, Selena Davis, Jody Foley, Lindell Michaela, Anne Sturdivant, and Dave Walter. So again, I want to thank Richard. He called my attention to the fact that Alex Jones was ranting about the idea that America become part of the English Commonwealth. I highly suggest you watch that, and that immediately sparked in my mind my recollection of what I had written about Thorkelson, and my recollection of what Webster Tarpley and Lyndon Johnson and all of this plan for a British-American Union and America re-entering the English Commonwealth, the British Empire. I've been talking about King Charles playing the role of King Herod. I have all of that recorded in my presentation, Charles III, Kabbalah of Herod, King Charles III, Kabbalistic Antichrist Portrait Decoded and Explained. And I'll put links to all that below in the description, or if it's on X, you can see it below in the comments. I've been talking about how Trump is the Messiah, son of Joseph. Jesus Christ returned as the Antichrist. King Charles III is King Herod. Trump is invited to visit Herod, just as Jesus did. Musk is John the Baptist, spreading the word for Trump. They're reenacting the whole script of the Gospels. Dates. He also was doing dates on Ramadan. And I explained in a video, dates are the unripe forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, the tree of death. King Charles III, King Herod, is cursing the United Kingdom to death and submission to the Noahide laws of Islam. Keir Starmer gave Trump a letter in which he was invited to meet with King Charles III to replicate the meeting of Jesus Christ with King Herod. Keir Starmer is playing the role of Pontius Pilate, representative of the Edomite Roman Leviathan, summoning Trump to speak to Herod Charles III. Well, Trump refuses to answer questions, all in imitation of the Gospels, because Trump is the Antichrist, Messiah, son of Joseph. Jesus Christ returned to kill us all. I also did a video on that, explaining how Pilate could find no fault with Trump. Starmer could find no fault with Trump. So he directed him to the Edomite king of the Jews, King Herod, who is being played in this second coming by King Charles III. And Starmer made a big deal out of the fact that this is only the second time that this kind of a meeting has been arranged. And I think that that was a cryptic reference to the idea that this will be the second time historically that Christ is going to meet with King Herod. Covered that. This is one of the comments I put in on the video, on the Kabbalah drama episode that I did with Richard. I highly suggest you watch that. If America joins the British Commonwealth, it will cement the Leviathan, Atlanticist, Edomite Rome of America and Great Britain under Edomite King Herod, King Charles III. The British royal family are descendants from the crypto-Jewish house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. King George V changed the name of the house of Windsor to conceal their true lineage. King Charles III is circumcised. He is a Jew. He descends from the Jew, Queen Victoria, who believed that she was descended from the house of David and that her heirs would provide the return of Jesus Christ as Messiah, son of David. They always foretold that, and they got Queen Elizabeth involved in the Zionist project to take over the Suez Canal through the Jewish British Prime Minister Disraeli as supposedly a good way to make money off of India through the Rothschilds' East India Company involvement. And they proposed that England could take over the Suez, take over Egypt, and that Jews would just be so good to the British as to move to Palestine and safeguard the Suez Canal for the British, as if they would have any power to do that, especially as compared to the tremendous power of the British under Queen Victoria. And I also covered all of that history in my book, The Manufacture and Sale of St. Einstein, which I published in 2006. You can find that book and my other books on these subjects at my website, cjbbooks.com. I really want to thank everyone who has been contributing to keep me working on all this. If you would like, and I really seriously, I'm deeply grateful for all the generous contributions I have received. And thank you so very much. Anyone who would like to contribute, in addition to my books and my social media links, you can find contribution links at my website, cjbbooks.com. Again, want to thank Richard Willett for calling my attention to this topic so that I could explain the full Kabbalah behind it. And I want to thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see all you wonderful people next time. Goodbye for now.